I okay, so I guess there's still some things that are functioning in the government. Um, the Inspector General for the Department of Defense put out a classified report this morning on Signalgate. Remember Pete Hegseth sharing classified military plans, bombing plans, relative to the Houthi rebels in Yemen earlier this year. I think it was in like March. Quoting Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth risked compromising sensitive military information, which could have endangered American troops and mission objectives when he used Signal, the chat app, in March of this year to share highly sensitive attack plans targeting Houthi rebels in Yemen. It was classified information, according to four sources familiar with the contents of the Inspector General's report. The repercussions of Hegseth's actions are less clear since the Inspector General concluded that the Defense Secretary has the authority to declassify information, and Hegseth asserted that he made an operational decision in the moment to share that information, though there is no documentation of such a decision on the part of Pete Hegseth. So remember back, so from March 11th to 15th in 2025, a group of United States national security leaders and Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine, were using the messaging service chat about the imminent military operations against the Houthis in Yemen, codenamed Operation Rough Rider. I mean, we have Operation Southern Spear. The code names that Pete Hegseth comes up with for these operations, every single one of them sounds like the title to a gay porn movie. So anyway, Opposition Rough Rider. And he was texting to these people using Signal, and it was J.D. Vance, some cabinet secretaries, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic, who had been erroneously added to the chat by Mike Waltz. He was like details about the times and locations from where fighter jets were going to take off, what weapons they were going to use, what missiles were going to be launched, when they were going to be launched, what was being targeted. I mean, it was before the attacks had taken place. And they were using Signal to have these communications, which is entirely hackable. Entirely hackable. And so it's like that information theoretically could have gotten to the Houthi rebels and could have put American troops in harm's way. Could have gotten Americans killed because they would have known ahead of time that it was coming. That's why war plans are classified. They're close hold. You don't share them. Yeah. On March 15th, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth used the chat to share sensitive and classified details of the impending airstrikes, including types of aircrafts and missiles, as well as launch and attack times. The name of an active undercover CIA officer was mentioned by CIA Director John Ratcliffe in the chat, while Vance and Hegseth expressed contempt for European allies. The contents of the chat became public on March 24th when Jeffrey Goldberg published a partially redacted transcript in The Atlantic. White House's national security spokesperson, Brian Hughes, verified the chat's authenticity after other Trump administration officials disputed Goldberg's characterization of the redacted sections as likely containing classified information. The Atlantic published the entire transcript on March 25th. The incident raised concerns about national security leaders' information security practices, you think? And what other sensitive information they might have revealed whether they were following records preservation laws. Snapchats delete, they self-delete. When you're the Secretary of Defense, the Vice President, the CIA Director, other cabinet secretaries, national security staff, it's unlawful for you to communicate in a way where you know that no records of that communication are going to be created or retained by the government, or when you are actively using methods to make sure that those communications self-delete after a period of time to avoid records keeping. Jesus, man. The political scandal was nicknamed Signalgate in the media because they were using Signal chat app. A forensic investigation by the White House Information Technology Office determined that Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor, had inadvertently saved Jeffrey Goldberg's phone number under a different person's contact information. Waltz then erroneously added Goldberg to the chat while trying to add this other person. Subsequently, investigative journalists reported that Mike Waltz's team regularly created Signal group chats to coordinate official work, and that Hegseth shared details about missile strikes in Yemen to a second Signal chat group, which included his wife, his brother, and his lawyer. I know that his brother works for DoD, so probably has some security clearances. His wife and his lawyer certainly don't. And why are you sharing this shit with your lawyer, man? But anyway, so the Inspector General put out this report this morning. It's classified, but 4 sources familiar with the contents. Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. Remember a month or two ago when Pete Hegseth frog marched every member of the media out of the Pentagon and said, you're not allowed to return unless you sign this document adhering to the new rules that I am imposing for the media and their access to personnel and information within the Department of Defense, and nobody would sign that. And so now you have like OAN and Newsmax in there. In fact, I think one of those two refused to sign this document as well. There are still people within the Department of Defense who are leaking like crazy to reputable news agencies about information like this, a classified report from the Inspector General that concluded, again, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth risked compromising sensitive military information which could have endangered American troops and mission objectives when he used the Signal chat app in March of this year to share highly sensitive classified war plans, attack plans targeting Houthi rebels in Yemen, according to 4 sources familiar with the contents of a classified Inspector General report. He put troops in danger by using Signal chat app and by sharing classified war plans with at least some people who didn't have the security clearances to see those war plans, and using a communication app that is easily hackable by our adversaries. Incompetence and malevolence, incompetence and malevolence, incompetence and malevolence coupled only with unimaginable arrogance and entitlement. That is Pete Hegseth in a fucking nutshell.